Hello, and thank you for joining us on this episode of Spartans in the Motor City. My name is John Gustin, and we are very happy to have you here on a special episode of Spartans in the Motor City. We have Bryce Simon today joining us from the Pistons Pulse Podcast he does with Omari Sankofa, the Pistons beat writer, and then Game Theory with Sam Vecenie. Bryce is going to talk about possible moves the Pistons could make ahead of the February 5th NBA trade deadline. That's coming up, and the Pistons are playing in a position of strength right now. We look at some moves they could make to shore up their roster, and also some of the big names out there in the NBA landscape at large, like Giannis Antetokounmpo. Now, obviously, there are new complications in place with the new systems regarding the NBA luxury tax and basically it being a hard cap. Also, what available assets are there left after multiple NBA teams have made trades, and in general, the Pistons looking for trying to thread the needle between using their current young prospects and up-and-comers versus maybe veteran experience, and what does that trade-off look like, and what does it mean for the long-term shape of the team? So Bryce is going to join us. We're very excited to have him, and thank you for watching us here on WLNS Plus. Well, I'm very happy to be able to take time out of a very busy schedule. I mean, you're a teacher, you're a podcaster, you're a coach, you're a father, husband. I mean, you do it all. And so I am jealous of your time management skills, but so I will not waste any more of your time because it is very precious, and we're going to get straight to it right now. The NBA trade deadline is almost upon us. It is just days away, and Detroit is in a really unique spot compared to where it's been the last few years, especially since you've been on the beat, that you actually get to enjoy the fruits of the labor, as it were, of having a team that is not only a playoff-bound team, as it were, but number one in the East. And even weirder, they're in a position of strength right now that if they're in these standings, moves they can make can be done whether they have a need to, which the needs are somewhat few and far between, or whether they think it is the right long term, or there is patience. So there is lots of different options here. What we've been looking at throughout the season is the number one thing for the team right now is shooting. Ever since Malik Beasley is not coming back to the team and everything that's happened around that, and even if he is maybe eligible to play, he's not going to be playing, fortunately or unfortunately. So shooting, looking mostly at the two-guard position, Duncan Robinson has provided that, at least the shooting in spades, looking kind of now for options across the league of shoring up the Pistons rotation in a few ways. The big one out there, the one that people keep bringing up, is Michael Porter Jr. with the Nets, who has been having an all-star, at least in the East, caliber season. Right now, proposed trade, starting our first deal or no deal. Looking right now, salary matches up. This is stuff I've run through the Fanspo trade machine to make sure the numbers work. Pistons trade for Michael Porter Jr. and giving up, going out to the Nets, Caris LeVert, Jaden Ivey, Ron Holland. Deal or no deal?
Oh man, I don't like this deal, John. You started off okay with Caris LeVert. I like that you were able to uniquely do this without Tobias Harris, right? Like, because most of these deals start with Tobias Harris, and usually, not that Tobias Harris is a deal breaker, but I think if you move out Tobias Harris and don't replace him with some sort of four-man, that can be a little bit of an issue. And I know Michael Porter Jr. is a good rebounder and all of that. So here's my thing is, like, I don't think Ron Holland is a deal breaker either, right? Like, individually, I'm not opposed to moving a Jaden Ivey. I'm not opposed to moving a Ron Holland. I don't know that I want to move those guys for the money and the salary that is Michael Porter Jr., for the injury concerns that are Michael Porter Jr., and maybe not being a long-term piece. I don't know if that's what he's going to be. To your point, though, I'm more in favor or more open to the Michael Porter Jr. joining the Detroit Pistons. I just think that I think his stock is so high right now. I don't love the idea of buying it at this point, if that makes sense.
Yes, that does. I think where I am looking at this, and this is now going to, I think, color some of this too, is that I think Jaden Ivey I would treat as maybe a slight positive right now because he's about to hit restricted free agency. That will depress his value for a moment, but he has not shown the same pop. There has been some times where he's been hitting his shots, but it's not been the same level. And I think this team, quite interestingly, where it was heavily criticized signing Tobias Harris, all those not too long ago, It would not be surprising. I mean, they're going to have to bring him back at the moment. He is a very adequate starter. I don't think he is a high-level scorer, but in terms of what this team needs, he has fit that role very well.
No, I agree. I think he's an important piece. I would not hate to see them bring him back on a much smaller deal. And ideally, though, in 26, 27, or maybe a move at the deadline, Tobias Harris is your four-man coming off the bench, right? Like you get him in a different role, almost in a Bobby Portis type role in Milwaukee, but he's doing that for Detroit. I don't think this is awful value to your point, right? Like at the end of the day, you're moving on from Karis LeVert, which most people don't want in the lineup anyway. Jaden Ivey, well, I don't want to give up on him, and I do feel like you're selling it as low as possible. I don't disagree, but that he may be a neutral value right now because of him hitting restricted free agency. And listen, I love Ron Holland. I think he fits the culture, but there have been offensive limitations with him as well. It's just a little hard to stomach trading two of those young guys for I think my fear with Michael Porter Jr., John, is like he's going to get here and then he's just going to get hurt. Like his body's going to break down, or he's going to go into a shooting spell where he just isn't knocking down shots at the rate he is right now. I think more than anything, I think more than questioning this value, it's like this just being terrified of buying in on Michael Porter Jr. at this juncture. I think that's what scares me more than anything.
And that can be said too for the upcoming restricted free agency of both. If the players continue to stay on the team as they are past the trade deadline, Jalen Duren and Ivy, both those players, Duren has shown something, definitely more at the start of the season, still has strong games, but he was playing at what felt like an all-NBA level for like the first 20 games of the season. And that's evened off and cooled off from restricted free agency should help with that a little bit based off of who has what cap space. But then to also play that dance too with Jaden Ivey, it is, I think, a complicated thing to navigate. So looking through right now, what I've got here is, I think, Michael Porter Jr., I don't want to throw firsts right now if I'm Detroit. I want to kind of keep the powder dry because at least as I'm canvassing the league right now, there is not a Lauren Markkanen is just not really available. That all the signals are coming is that he is staying put, and he would be the perfect fit. But I also don't want to see this team do what the Knicks did with all their trades of like how many picks went out for Mikal Bridges and versus what's now available for Giannis in talks. It's kind of crazy.
What's funny is I almost was going to go into this more willing to trade a singular first-round pick for Michael Porter Jr., and you threw a curveball at me by matching salaries different than most have proposed with the Michael Porter Jr. deal, and then trying to wrap my head around moving on from Ron Holland. You kind of threw me for a loop there with that. I mean, some could argue, like, which is more valuable, having Ron Holland right now, second year into the league, or pick or 2028 first round pick. I don't want to trade the 2026 first round pick. I don't like I really like this team went through multiple years of first round picks. I don't like the idea of where they're at in their build of having back-to-back years without a first round pick coming into the organization. And I understand people say, well, 2026 it's going to be in the mid to late 20s. I get it. But where they didn't have one last year, I don't like the idea of them not having one again in 2026.
Now, we talked about Ron Holland a couple times here because Ron Holland, at least what we're seeing here, definitely is at least a first-round pick. But looking at that, I would say probably two, if not shading around how you want to do Eye of the Beholder. That's the only time I think I've really included Ron Holland in any of these proposals for the Pistons right now because I think it's one of those parts where you don't want to be too duplicative of what the star does in terms of the spacing, and we want space for Cade to operate. Now, one possible move looking at with the Pistons, if you're not going necessarily for a floor spacer, but you're looking for a lockdown guard who would be very comfortable closing next to Cade Cunningham in a playoff series. Drew Holiday with Portland right now. Drew was sent out there over when there was the Anthony Simons trade from Portland to Boston, and as Boston was looking to kind of reshuffle their roster. And right now, Drew Holiday having a solid season, but doesn't really fit in with that young core of Portland right now that's not looking to make anything. And he's on a 3-year, $32 million per year contract. He could be moved to the Pistons, in theory, for Jaden Ivey, Karis LeVert, and a minimum contract. and that would make the numbers work. Drew Holiday in that situation serves as your kind of off guard off Cade, which a role he's already done with Giannis Antetokounmpo, and has shown that he has done that well too in Boston. So there's multiple scenarios where Drew Holiday has shown he can be a playoff capable point guard slash off guard, which would be a great fit next to Cade Cunningham. However, he is definitely a little bit older too than the young core the Pistons have. However, he is also a little bit older too than the young core the Pistons have.
So that doesn't sound like bad value. My question here would be what this does cap space wise moving forward. So I think that would be my only hold up on this one, where Drew still has 35 million in 26, 27, 30, 35, and then 37 in 27, 28. You just mentioned the Jalen Duren restricted free agency and all of that. I would consider this assuming health from Drew Holiday. We've seen him miss games this year, and taking a deeper dive into what that would then put the Pistons in terms of cap space, because I don't think Drew Holiday is exactly the player this team is missing. So that would be my hold up there. But I do think Drew Holiday would make them better and help them make a push through the playoffs this season.
Next up, just going down the list, Drew Holiday. He's a good fit. He's a good defender. He can shoot. His 35% to high 30s. It varies, wax and wanes. But like you were saying, the value there in terms of the long-term salary and where the Pistons are at. Pistons aren't really going to be a cap space team anytime soon, but they definitely want to navigate the luxury tax line and where that goes. So other options here on this. Now, if you're looking at maybe a little bit shorter, but definitely a bigger, maybe one-time spike, other big swing, a Duncan Robinson, Caris LeVert, Jaden Ivey for Zach LaVine, Keon Ellis, plus possible additional sweetener or two to the Kings. Pistons have a plethora of second-round picks. Maybe a few of that is something to get it done.
Yeah, so that one's interesting because you bring in Keon Ellis, which I really like. Listen, Zach LaVine has been a name that has been interesting to me going back a little bit. And you're getting really close to the point with that contract where it's a little bit more palatable, right? I think the question is, I thought before this season, we saw a little bit more defensive effort from Zach LaVine and some of those things. You only have the one more year on his deal with the player option. I do wonder if sending out Duncan Robinson in that deal, you still end up with some of the same spacing things. You get the more dynamic scorer in LaVine, obviously, and Keon Ellis can knock down threes, but it's not like he's a floor spacer gravity guy the way those guys are. So I think you get a major upgrade offensively, but I wonder if you still end up with a little bit of holes on the roster in terms of not having that secondary, floor spacer now coming off the bench in non-LaVine minutes.
And that's the thing, too, trying to navigate with all these is that with the Pistons construct right now, the only large salary that they have outside of Cade is either Duncan, Tobias Harris, Stewart, and really it feels like for what this team needs, it needs Tobias basically. There is no one else at the spot to be a four-man on this team, really in that true size and the true spacing. Holland and Asar are undersized for that. Stewart, I'm curious about if down the road, if maybe Tobias ages out a little bit and becomes more of a depth player or maybe not necessarily a closer, if Stewart's three-point shot continues to advance. What I've seen this season compared to a couple seasons ago with the experiment of him at the four, he's actually spacing, he's got gravity, he's had his career scoring game this year. I think Stewart and Duren have shown that they can coexist at times, but this team has certain needs that it has to be very careful managing all of this, looking at this. So looking at something even shorter for an expiring, going for a scenario, I guess, D option here. This is a little funny. Caris LeVert and Jaden Ivey to the Hawks for CJ McCollum.
Caris LeVert and Okay, so I think I think the theme of all of this is me getting past moving Jaden Ivey for a short-term answer. I think that's where my struggle is, and this is something I continue to try to workshop, because I'm even going back to that Kings one now, and it's like, you're giving me Keon Ellis too in that deal, right? Like that Kings one is a little more enticing than what I thought initially because I don't know what Zach LaVine is and if he is the guy that you want to try to push this forward, but also getting Keon Ellis kind of lowers the risk, I guess, of that. I think CJ McCollum is a great fit for this team. I think you take CJ McCollum, you put him in the starting lineup next to Cade, you get him for 1 year to make this playoff push. I just, this again, I'm trying to get past moving Jaden Ivey, and maybe it's time. Maybe I just need to get here for something that's not like if you're trying to trade Jaden Ivey for Trey Murphy, like, okay, right? Like, I can understand because that's a longer term piece. I'm struggling with the Jaden Ivey for the hey, CJ McCollum's going to be here for 1 year, but I don't know that I think Jaden Ivey's going to be here next year. I don't know what that contract situation is going to be. So I, I don't hate this, John. I think it's interesting, but I think that's because I do think CJ has one more, has 30 games and a playoff run in him to give this team.
And I think a lot of this, too, for any of the sides here, it's going to be anchoring. Where are you on your guys? Front offices are usually higher on their guys, especially if they're the ones who drafted him. Jaden Ivey is a previous regime's player. So there's been plenty of jokes bandied around about, you mentioned Trey Murphy. So can you reunite a former GM with his picks? I mean, he's technically not the GM, but I mean, it's a different Pistons GM. But it sounds like at least the understanding people believe is that Joe Dumars is maybe the figurehead and Troy Weaver is the guy in charge. And so can you extract maybe more value by sending some of those players to him? But I think it really becomes, it's the weighing the present for the future. And what do other teams think of Jaden Ivey? I think Holland's stock is probably high enough. He's still young enough. You're not paying him right away. There is, I think, a sense of real value there. Ivy, it's almost like the discussions around Jalen Green and where is he at, and he's going to sign a similar contract for that too. Is that maybe instead of $25 million, is Jaden Ivey going to have like a 2-year $20 million with some form of 30-year option there that gives both sides something? Because it's, especially if you're coming back from injury, but this isn't even like Ivy didn't ever pop the amount of usage that we saw in Houston with him, with Green. So it's a really weird situation for everyone to navigate this offseason. And it almost feels like for both sides, you want to kick the can down the road. But then is Jaden Ivey someone you can have in the Eastern Conference Finals closing a game right now?
I think Jaden Ivey's the toughest player on the team right now for me to just feel very confident in what I think about him, right? Like Cade Cunningham is fairly easy. Jalen Duren, I don't want to say there's not a delta, like a separation in what he could be, what he is, whatever. But like we've seen in us, even Asar Thompson, and that's with not much offensive growth this year. Like I kind of have a feel for what Asar is. I think what I'm struggling with Jaden Ivey is like, is this who he is? Is this a product of the injury? Why is he not playing more? I think there's a little recency bias of when we're recording this, which is right after the game against the Suns, where John, like, he didn't even play in the second half. He got no second half minutes. And it's like, well, is he not feeling well? Is he okay? What, to your point, what does the organization feel about him? And so I've seen some people are like, hey, he has no value left. Like, I think they would trade him in all of these deals. I'm trying to let go of what I thought Jaden Ivey was going to be. And maybe I'm struggling with that a little bit too much because I think some of these, it probably does make sense to go ahead and like, hey, if that's the biggest piece in this and he may not be part of your playoff rotation anyway, and then you're not going to pay him this summer, why not bring in CJ McCollum on an expiring? You know what I mean? Like, I think there's an argument for that.
Duncan Robinson, too, has not been bad. Like, he's been very, very good. This is no slide of talking about wanting a different two-guard out there. I think Robinson's defense has also been slightly underrated. I think his size, he does well against bigger matchups, kind of like how Harden has taken on bigger players. Duncan Robinson getting steals, too. I've been surprised with his hands. Obviously, he is getting beaten in a one-on-one and pick-and-roll situations. But, like, you're not bringing him in with that illusion that he's going to be this lockdown defender. And there was Malik Beasley and Tim Hardaway. And then last year, and also Dennis Schroeder. Like this, there's nothing been really perfect there. And so that's why the Michael Porter spot felt very clean because Asar slides down to the 2, you keep Tobias at the 4, and then if Holland or maybe a heavily protected pick is all you're sitting out, there's then still plenty of assets to maybe turn Tobias Harris down the line into a Lauri Markkanen or the next big guy, or Porter slides up to the 4. But all this time around, it's just, where is this team at and how is it going to function? And I think the one thing we all see right now is that there's not a second guy at the moment where you can say, go get a bucket on a regular basis. It's Cade. Tobias, I think, is very efficient, and he's not that guy, and that's okay. And a lot of the times when you see LeVert out there, LeVert, I think, is trying to make it happen. And I feel less confident with LeVert doing that in a closing situation than I do as a microwave off the bench. And I think that's almost the role looking for right now, is someone to be the number 2 on offense, at least on the perimeter, because I think Duren is just eating it up inside. That's without a doubt.
Yeah, no, I agree. We're in the same spot. I think they absolutely need another perimeter scorer. I think the question is, like, do you think that guy? So here's my thing with, like, the Porter Jr. and the Ron Holland, because I keep going back to that one because I love the creativity of not trading Tobias and the idea.
Oh yeah, he's
behind
staying.
that.
He's staying.
Yeah. So I love that idea. So what I need to hash out then is, am I willing to? Is Michael Porter Jr. gonna take me deep enough into the playoffs this year that I'm willing to trade Ron Holland? And that's what, as much as I say, I think this team needs that number 2 scorer, that perimeter threat to go with Cade. My question then is that then enough? Is Michael Porter Jr. that answer? Even going back to CJ McCollum, like, is CJ McCollum enough of that to trade off something? And so I think that's what is the big question right now. Is I think we all see the flaw, right? We all see it. We know what it is. Number 2 scores / floor spacing. The question is, what is the answer to the flaw? And what are you willing to trade and give up to answer that? And here's the other thing, John, like, do they have to do this year? Like, do they need to make it happen right now? And that's why I think all of these are so interesting to go through.
Especially because it comes down to, what do you believe? Do you think that this is
Correct.
a unique season with the standings, that where the Cavs are with the injury issues, with the Celtics being surprisingly good despite the Jason Tatum injury, which I think, not going to even get into that, but Tatum now is a different level of pressure if he returns and they're a number 2 seed, a number 1 seed, versus them being the number 10 seed. You can be a recovering Jason Tatum as a 10 seed versus he can't play 40 minutes a night coming off of the Achilles. And that's a whole interesting dynamic in that locker room and office to navigate now, with the report coming out that he might not return. But it's the up and down. Do the Knicks take another move? Do Knicks get Giannis this off season maybe, or even this season? And it takes a moment to integrate, but then next season, is it firing on all cylinders? I think this is such a unique opportunity with this team, especially because it's Cade and Asar, Tobias, and Duren. So it's Cade and 3 anywhere from suitable to good starters, but there's no second star yet. And to still be number 1 in like a Pacers, Paul George, David West era, or Hawks when it was with Paul Millsap, when it was a collective, kind of the Grizzlies grit and grind. There is a collective effort to this Pistons team right now, and that, will they need that second star to propel them out of it? And if so, is it something that you are going to be able to be patient on? Or are you going to, is this the Hawks, the one time that they make the Eastern Conference Finals and then they don't get back there? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I want some gas. I don't want to say burn the house down to try to get a spark right now, but to at least cash in a little bit. And that's where the Ron Holland versus all the picks are. If you can save something for later to really make the big move. So can you get your number 3 guy who's your number 2 for now? Or maybe it's even a CJ McCollum on the buyout market would be amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that would be awesome, right? Like, that's the ideal scenario, as you get him there. And that's what, like, I think what we get to talk about as Pistons content creators, fans, whatever now, is asset management, right? Like, that's what I've been trying to game out is, okay, is it better just to use Jaden Ivey in one of these deals you're talking about, or the Jalen Green-ish type of contract that you referenced earlier, right? Like, is it actually better to have him on that deal and be able to use him in matching salary? Because as we've gone through these, we realize you need matching salary. You need salary that you're willing to give up to go get said number 2 option on your team. And so that's what's like, is it better to trade him for CJ McCollum, who you're only going to use for a year? Or is it actually better use of that asset? And I hate to talk about players as assets, but we know that this is a business, and, sign him to that contract that is essentially a trade exception, right? That's essentially what Jalen Green's deal was. Does Jaden Ivey even have the value to do that, right? Because we haven't seen extremely positive and productive play this year. So there's just a lot of different paths that they can go right now. And this is the hard part for Trajan, because you're right. It looks like this is a year where you'd want to make a move and go for it. And it's funny because some people will say this young core deserves to see if they're good enough on their own. And then you listen to other people who will say, no, this organization deserves to go for it now. You have to go make a big move because you know what you're missing. Like, you can see both sides of this thing.
I think at the end of the day, I just feel bad for Cade. Like, I feel bad with the running into 3 people in the post for when that happened for a couple of years. To the usage that he has, and he's cut down on the turnovers this year, which is amazing, because that's always been the issue with a level of player with this, right? Even if you say, well, the total number of turnovers and everything, yes, but the amount he has it in his hand versus the assists and everything, it is remarkable. And I think it's one of those of that you want a relief valve. And if that relief valve is Duran, Tobias Harris, and Karis LeVert, are you being fair to him too on this is your max player? But he's going to be here a while. His health has not been an issue. I think there's also something to be talked about too of that. Can you go do something? The Pistons have something like 14 second-round picks right now between now and 2032. And can you do something where you package 4 of those together and it's equivalent to a first? When Jay Crowder was moved, couple guys right here who fall into the trade exception, where the Pistons either could just take into the trade exception to offer relief, or it's maybe a few seconds going out where you're not going to squabble. So I'm just going to lift off a few names and just say yes or no, and then when you get to the end, we'll circle back to which ones really pop to you. So just kind of handling the backup forward or guard ideas, and this is also maybe people shaking out. So the first one up, Luke Kennard, the return, shooting, another little ball handler. Would you take him? Deal or no deal?
In a vacuum, yes. Like, I guess we'll game out him versus other yeses, but in a vacuum, I don't mind this idea.
Sam Hauser.
Yes.
Yes, 100% yes. George Niang.
No.
Ayo Dosunmu.
Real quick, Niang is like, I just don't know what Niang has left right now.
Exactly.
Right? Like, I don't know. Ayo Dosunmu, yes, and another yes.
Tyus Jones.
No. He's been really good this year. No. Tyus Jones has been awful. Trey Jones has been good. So no.
Yes.
No Tyus Jones. No. No.
Dean Wade.
Yes, because he's from a small town in Kansas just like me, so I have to say yes.
Saddiq Bey.
That's unfair. Yes, Saddiq has been really good this year. There's no way that Troy Weaver's trading him again and making that mistake. I will say, though, Saddiq has been good inside the three-point line. I don't know that he fully solves some of the questions we have, but he's been good enough that I would take him.
At last checks, I think he was at 35% from 3, so enough to be respectable.
Okay, so it's gone up just I feel like the last time I had looked, it was a little bit lower. But yeah, I mean, I would take him. He's at 34%. Like, we're right there, right? He's been really good inside the three-point line.
Jordan Hawkins.
Yes, but I mean, I don't think he's, I don't know that right now he's like the savior that maybe at one point I thought he could be. Like, not a savior, but you know what I mean? Like, I don't know that he's coming in for 14 minutes in the playoffs the way I thought maybe at one point. He's got to figure some other things out as well.
Yeah, no, I miss when he was a three-point bomber, and it was like it felt like him and Trey Murphy was going to be an incredible like Splash Brothers, but yeah, no. And then Nikola Jovic.
Yes, although I find myself underwhelmed every time I watch Jovic in terms of it's more practical than, or excuse me, it's more theoretical than practical. In terms of like the idea of his size and skill and the intersection of that is awesome. I just don't see it play out on the court enough. But I would take the chance in a vacuum.
And really, a lot of these, as you probably picked up on, was looking for someone with size to be the
Yeah.
backup power forward. Because right now it's either Stewart or it's Holland, and there's no one in that size. And maybe it would have been Fontecchio if the Duncan Robinson trade and all that didn't happen. I mean, he wasn't really in the rotation last year. Bickerstaff didn't seem to be his biggest fan, but like a lot of these too, I'm just looking at like, I mean, Sam Hauser's the easy one, but like, I don't know if Boston's gonna make, like, a salary savings moves like we all thought they would at the start of the season. Sam Hauser was just the easy answer, and now it's like, if I'm Boston, you're holding on to kind of everybody, I think.
Yeah. No, I agree. I assume that Hauser's not going to be on the market. He's definitely one of my favorite names. Io DeSumo was probably my favorite name there. Um, and I've gotten some pushback with some of this stuff. Like, well, who's he going to replace in the rotation? My counter, John, is like I trust six guys right now in the playoffs. I trust Cade fully, Duran fully, Tobias fully, Stu fully, and then I would stop there because Duncan Robinson has defensive limitations, although I think you have to play him.
You
And
trust him to
Asar
play
has
minutes,
some
but you don't trust him to close. There's a difference too.
correct. Correct. And Asar has some offensive limitations right now as well. Now, are we not going to play Asar Thompson in the playoffs? Of course they are. And they absolutely should. And he's going to deserve it. He's one of the best players in the league. But to me, I trust those six, no question. The reason I don't say Ron Holland is we've already named a complete non-shooter in Asar Thompson, a complete non-shooter in Jalen Duren, a low volume shooter in Isaiah Stewart. And are we sure in a playoff setting we can guarantee that Ron Holland gets to play? And then everybody wants to throw out Javonte Green, Dennis Jenkins, Jaden Ivey, Karis, like all of these names. I'm like, the fact we can throw out all of them speaks to the fact that there is no answer. So I'm okay if I add an Io DeSumo, who I think just flat out is I would trust more right now than any of those other names, or a Sam Hauser or whatever. That doesn't mean that Dennis Jenkins may still not get to play, but I'm okay bringing in another name to the mix to give JB yet another option that he might believe in throughout a playoff run where the rotations could change depending on the matchup.
And not Karis LeVert. Not because I think LeVert's a bad player, but it does feel like, and I know people mention this, and maybe it's unfair, but I think Bickerstaff trusts him, and I think the role he was in Cleveland when you had both Darius Garland and Donovan Mitchell, when you had two alpha perimeter players there, I think LeVert worked well there. Here, he is needed. He is asked to do more, and that might be just slightly beyond his skis.
Yeah, no, I don't disagree. I actually think people go at his defense a lot. I actually think Karas's defense has been fine. There's some of the offensive stuff where, like you said, maybe he's being asked to do too much. It's over his skis, to your analogy. And so, like, again, I'm okay with adding in, if they don't make the big move, right? They don't do the Michael Porter Jr., the Zach LaVine, the CJ McCollum, whatever. I am perfectly fine with them bringing another competent rotation player into this fold, because I think the more options based on where things are at right now are the better. And one reason why I love Io DeSumo is I think with Io, there's a higher ceiling there potentially. I'm not saying guarantee. Like, I think we all know who Sam Hauser is, right? Io DeSumo, there's a chance you get him to Detroit, and all of a sudden, by the time the playoffs are over, you're going, we got our starting guard next to Cade Cunningham. I'm not saying he's your number two option, but you may look at him as a starter for this team moving forward. He has been very good this year.
And the reason I don't say Colby White, because one, I think the contract demands are going to be it's just a different level of assets.
Yeah, it's a dicey situation.
And trading with the Bulls too, like, do the Bulls know how to trade? That's also another ongoing joke. Like, they like to do player for player, and I think that is definitely a little bit harder right now for this. And the other way that the Pistons, I think, can take advantage, and they showed this last year too, is that can they be the third team, the fourth team, the fifth team? And there are some big trades we're going to go over in a moment that I think the Pistons, whatever happens, I think they can be that additional team because of the trade exception that they have. I mean, they were able to bring in Schroeder last year using space to do so, and it was a very easy transaction, helping Golden State out a little bit there. And I think something else could be done like that this year as well with, funny enough, the sign and trade for Schroeder to the Kings. So the crazy one here I'm going to go with first is, and as of now, I was wondering if we were going to even be able to talk before Giannis was traded, and then it gets walked back. And I've now lost track of how many times it sounds like Giannis is about to get traded, and then it's now being walked back. So going with the first option here, I'm just going to list off some crazy league-wide deals because, one, I think you and Sam did an amazing job, and you inspire me to do some really dumb things by comparison. But I'm bringing in at least someone who can tell me how dumb it is. But I think there is something at least interest here too. So first on this, if Giannis is staying and they want to get help, the Knicks right now, there's been so much grumbling involving Karl Anthony Towns. Do you straight up Karl Anthony Towns and a Gershon Yabusele for Miles Turner and Kyle Kuzma?
No, Milwaukee has to give up. I don't know what else. I think Milwaukee would have to give up some more there, I think.
I think so because of the amount of what you consider the assets that went in with Karl Anthony Towns, but like the Turner fit as being out there and being a two-way player, and I think Kuzma, maybe you can rehab value there off of the bench. I mean, I trust Mike Brown as a coach. I mean, it's been about bumpy, but I think he's a good coach. Now, I would have thought too that Thibodeau would have maybe been able to get Kuzma to defend, or maybe Thibodeau would have had an aneurysm. I'm not sure.
Or he
either
would have
way,
just benched him, one
yes,
or the other.
Yes. But I think that's an interesting construct. It reminds me a little bit too of. I mean, Turner's been such a fun trade candidate over the years because he is one of the true two-way stretch fives, and that's a unique value. So let's say the Bucks finally decide to pull the ripcord. The team to me that is very interesting in this would be the Bucks. Salary-wise, this works. I have no idea what the picks are, and the war chest isn't the same as it was. But Anthony Simons and Derek White to the from the Celtics to the Bucks for Giannis and Ryan Rollins, with the Celtics probably sending out a ton of picks. And it makes them more expensive, but the new ownership group in theory should be able to pay for it. You give relief for Tatum coming off. Peyton Pritchard, I still think, is a great player, especially with these guys. I've not heard, I don't know enough of like Giannis to the Bucks. I don't think it's something that he would necessarily want, but it is a shorter flight to Greece from Boston compared to Los Angeles.
No, that's an interesting one. Him play, I mean, goodness, could you imagine Giannis, Brown, and Tatum all together at one point? The one thing I always think about with Giannis is, are you getting him a stretch big to play with? Boston doesn't necessarily have that, with all due respect to Luka Garza. I always cringe a little bit when I hear Derek White getting traded from Boston, because I'm just like, he just, epitomizes, but you make a good point with Peyton Pritchard. That is I would give you some love there. That is creative in terms of bringing in a team that nobody else is talking about in terms of the Celtics. I don't know what the pick capital would take there, but
and the other part too becomes, what value is there for Boston's picks if you're looking at, like, you have Giannis, Tatum, and Brown? Like, okay, that's like the 31st pick in the draft equivalent. I mean, yeah.
I think a huge part of that, and this where you could rope Detroit in, not necessarily with the exception, is like, would a team like Detroit then give up a couple first-round picks to take Derek White off your hands, right? Like, could you then, okay, we're not getting as much as we want from Boston, but we're getting Derek White, and we know that we have this next trade lined up to move him on to the next team, because I do think Derek White would be awesome next to Cade Cunningham.
And looking at it right now, Boston looks like it has access to number one picks outside of 2029. 2028 is a San Antonio right to swap. And then there's a few seconds there. So, I mean, there's first, it's not the bereft cupboard that some of these other teams that are trying to trade for Giannis have. And that's the other trick, too, is that there's bandied around concepts of, do you trade Mikal Bridges and then use those assets to go get Giannis and things like that. And as we have seen and as people much smarter than I have discussed, the more teams, the more moving parts you have in a trade, the much harder it is to get done. And I think that's the other part, too, of the timing of all this is midseason, less people have their picks. There's less roster space. There's less space to arrange a roster around this. Now, this is a trade that I just kind of, I think, stuck in my head. The last crazy trade I have for you, and it's a two-parter. The first one is let's get LeBron his own team, and by his own team, I mean Steph's team, does a three-teamer of LeBron to the Warriors, Jimmy Butler to the Nets, Michael Porter and Zaire Williams to the Lakers, with capital going to the Nets in some form or fashion. Does that work for people?
So I like the idea of Michael Porter Jr. offensively for the Lakers. I don't think he fixes any of the defensive stuff, obviously, but I think just in general, you simplify the hierarchy of that team, right? Like you make that move and it's Luka's team, Austin Reeves playing off of him in the Kyrie-ish role in Dallas, and then Michael Porter Jr., you go back to being the number 3 offensive option like you were in Denver. The issue, like, and maybe there's a fix there, right? Because then, or that starts the fix of that roster construction. And then you said LeBron to Golden State. Like, yeah, listen, as a fan of the NBA, I will take a year or whatever. I would take a half a year of Steph Curry, LeBron James, and Draymond Green playing together. Like, sign me up. I would thoroughly enjoy watching that. I have no idea how good it would be. I don't know. I mean, I don't know how deep of a playoff run they're making, but I would be into that. And then Brooklyn, you said, essentially just gets picks for that.
Yeah, something for taking on Jimmy Butler and something for sending out. So it would probably be if you could get away with it as the Warriors, like a far out first with some protection, because then you can say the Warriors are going to be bad at that time with essentially a top 3 protection on it. So you're getting a lottery pick for taking on a little bit of Jimmy Butler, and then they could continue to do what they've done with Cam Johnson. And if Butler comes back and is healthy, is he you flip him again and get another pick for another wing coming out of the next, continuing this rinse, wash, and repeat, the OKC system of get assets for someone coming and going.
The one thing I will bring up here is I wonder what this would do to the Lakers cap space situation, though, because that's one thing that we've talked about is in terms of the money they have coming off their books. And now all of a sudden with Porter Jr., you're going to disrupt that a little bit. So that would be a very important piece of this in regards to that. So that might actually kind of nullify this a little bit, depending on the flexibility it leaves them in the offseason.
Yeah, right now I'm seeing numbers for about $54 million in cap space. So that would definitely chip into that a fair amount. But could you move people around or otherwise? And that's the question is, can you do a way to get 2 people in instead of 1, or how do you break up that space? But yeah, that's probably not the star that they're looking for, but also where free agency is this day and age, is it more of almost using your cap space in with it a sign and trade because of all the extensions? But because a lot of players are so few people are hitting free agency, let alone restricted free agency. But maybe it's something like that for the Lakers too, of that restricted free agency plus something. But then if you keep trying to take Lakers exceptionalism, how valuable are their picks? But this year a little bit more valuable. The other one was definitely the 2K option here was and this was gamed out a little bit more with picks. The supersized version of that, defaulting one more team in here, the Pelicans, sending out Kuminga and Trey Jackson-Davis to the Pelicans for Trey Murphy. The Pelicans get 3 firsts, 2026, 2029, 2032, protections on 29's a swap, 32's top 3, and then the Nets get a 2028 first rounder. I don't think that's enough assets. I don't think Weaver and Dumars. Doesn't sound like there's enough out there for Trey Murphy right now. And this is the really weird situation with all of this, is that I think there are players who would be happier in other places. I think there are teams that are ready to move on from their players. But within the current luxury cap situation of the league, it makes it hard to do these in-season trades. So many assets have already been moved and changed from so many other superstar trades. I feel like we're going to be maybe a little disappointed come next week.
Well, and it's why Trey Murphy's so valuable is because he's on such a ridiculous contract. It's like I was thinking through this the other day, and like I can't sit here and continue to talk about how I think this Pistons team is flawed for a playoff run and then continue to push back on making a move on Trey Murphy, because I think Trey Murphy does fit in very, very well. And I can't even use the Michael Porter Jr. excuse of the contract number, right? Because it's not a bad contract number whatsoever. There are some injury stuff that maybe people could point to, but I think that is why, to your point, a Trey Murphy trade is going to the Pelicans would be crazy to relinquish him without a haul. Like,
and that's the wild thing is that it's the Michael Bridges thing. It's like it's going to be the same thing of like Desmond Bane going for all these picks and all your swaps. But then Giannis, like we're seeing options of these are the teams who want him for 2 picks. Like, and that's the wild part too is do you want to pay the haul it is to get Trey Murphy versus Michael Porter as well? And I think that's the other cost benefit of analysis of even if like I think Trey Murphy's a very, very good player, but he's also the like perfect fit of like he is your final starter, he's your final piece. He's not your Superman to your Batman or your Robin to your Batman. He's your really good 3-and-D wing who can maybe size up a little bit. But like same thing with Desmond Bane too. Desmond Bane I think is a great player. Is he worth all of this if Franz Wagner and Paulo Banchero aren't like all NBA level guys?
And that's where I think you get back to Detroit, right? Like to your point, let's say they go get Trey Murphy, right? What if Jalen Duren, I don't want people to hate me here, what if Jalen Duren is a little bit more of the December version of Jalen Duren than the November version of Jalen Duren? And for context here, I'm pulling up the numbers on that just so people kind of understand what I'm saying. In November, Jalen Duren averaged 21.5 points. In December, he averaged 16 points. That's not bad, but is that good enough? And Asar Thompson, as we mentioned earlier, has somewhat, to me, plateaued on the offensive end. They still don't have an answer at the 4 in any of these conversations. And so to your point, like, do you want to relinquish all of those draft assets to then find out, hey, Trey Murphy's good enough. He's what we thought he was. But actually, all of these other guys weren't quite what we thought. And now we're still short and we've gotten rid of this draft haul. And that's what makes it so difficult to decide. And I think why what we led with makes so much more sense in terms of one of those trades, because it's such a shorter term, quote unquote, fix without giving up that haul where, hey, we got to go trade the farm for Lowry Markkanen because Cade Cunningham is now 27 and we got to make a move or else he's going to demand a trade, right? Or whatever. So it is. And I think to your point, that's the other thing I want to say. You're not just trading for Giannis Antetokounmpo. You're trading for Giannis and the right to pay him 4 years, $280 million for his age 33, 34, 35, 36 season.
And he's not playing back-to-backs. He's got calf issues. It's not just Giannis Antetokounmpo and that contract. It's Giannis Antetokounmpo now and in the future with a game that is so predicated on explosive strength and being a singular type of offensive force.
Yeah, that's why it's scary. And again, I think that's why Trey Murphy, it's about impossible to actually acquire him because that contract is just sick that he is on. It is sick.
And this is just such a weird spot to be in the NBA because for a while there was a plethora of 2 guards out there. There used to be stretch 4s. Like I am missing my Ersan Ilyasovas, my Ryan Andersons, like a nice stretch 4 just to drop in here. I see Sam Hauser and I can't think of another. I mean, George Niang a couple of years ago, but the stretch four archetype is gone. It's a lot of more wing players, and at least with the Pistons, Javonte Green, while he is like what 6'4", like that dude is rugged and he plays and defends 2 through 4, and it's
Yeah.
great to have that depth and energy. And that also is part of the strategy here too, maybe, is that we see the level of injuries and the attrition that happens throughout the NBA season, and that all the issues that in my opinion, overly punitive luxury tax is having on the league. Because if you're a really good team, it's now impossible, at least for owners, for the most part, who don't want to pay that tax, to keep a team together where they could sign a player and then just keep adding through the MLE or a few picks here, add a restricted free agent. I thought what the Cavs did years ago when they picked up Amon Shumpert and J.R. Smith and were able to use bird rights to jack up to go back over and just ignore the cap. That doesn't exist now. And the Pistons' advantage right now is that they have, like you're talking about, so many guys that they're able to survive, even on nights when the entire starting lineup is gone, basically, outside of Duncan Robinson. They were still winning with Dennis Jenkins, who, whether his shooting comes and goes, fantastic passer. I am loving that man's passing. It is just,
Yep.
it is wonderful to have. So
Yep.
there's no right answers. And I think that's a really exciting part with the league too. Offensive rebounds can be a thing. Switching 3 and D is a thing. Wings are a thing. Bigs are a thing now. Strength in numbers is huge and reliable. There's no right answers, which is really enjoyable for watching the product, but also makes it infuriating of like, I know what I have a hole on, but I have no right answer to solve it.
Sure. Yeah. No, I'm to the point, and I enjoyed this, so don't get me wrong, but I'm kind of to the point where I'm just ready for the deadline to happen and analyze what Trajan Langdon does or does not do. You know what I mean? Like, I feel like we've gamed out and we've talked about every potential name out there, and somehow he'll find a way to trade for a name we didn't talk about. But I'm kind of ready to just let's let the deadline happen, and then let's evaluate what Trajan thought about his team and what he did with the team and how we think it's going to look moving forward now.
Yeah, there's been so much ink spelt digitally and I guess voices bled on this subject that right now I think what we can do with this is we can celebrate that we're having this conversation, not about picks, not about assets, not about under the radar finds, second draft guys. It's about this team's in a really good spot. And
Yep.
I think we can all be happy about that. And
That's
we can all
100%.
be really, really happy too about the work that you do, Bryce. You are everywhere. Where can people find you?
Yeah, so at Motor City Hoops on Twitter, on Blue Sky, got the Motor City Hoops Substack, where you can check out notes and analysis after every game, some video breakdowns here and there. Game Theory Substack, where we do video breakdowns and have our NBA draft show. And then, of course, just the straight Game Theory podcast, where we talk about the NBA draft, all of that.
I found you originally when the Bunny Cardigan show ended. I needed my Pistons fix. I found you with O2, Omari Sankofa, and I've been on the ride ever since. And then I've been listening to Game Theory, and you happened to pop on at the same time, and it was kind of serendipitous. So I've been a huge admirer of your work, both as a podcaster and as a human being. The stories I hear you talk about your family, your lawn equipment. I hope you didn't get any nerve damage from shoveling a couple of days
No,
ago.
I survived, but yeah, I was nervous. It's actually it started snowing as we were recording. My wife texted me, but not nearly as cold.
He's a teacher. He's an educator. He is one of the most positive people you will hear in the NBA space, who brings a unique level of insight, both as a former player on a D1 hooper, as he likes to call himself, as he was, and he does it all. And we are very thankful to have him here on this episode of Spartans in the Motor City. Bryce, thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate it.